This is a story that a lot of people remember growing up. Their grandmother would tell them, and there's all kinds of different versions of it, all through these Appalachians. Now, this is an old story. I can remember this story when I was 6 years old, and 60 years later, I still remember it to this day. And everybody has their own version, but this is my grandmother's version of Rawhead and Bloody Bones. Now, when I was a little old bitty thing, Mom and Dad happened to do something or just be together or something going on, and we'd end up here at my mammy's house. That's my mama. And there'd be some cousins here too. You count my two brothers and my sister and a couple of cousins, you got a handful. And we'd run all day long here at this house. We loved it here, and she loved us being here. And she knowed she couldn't run after us kids all day long, and she sure wasn't going to whoop one of us. Dog dare nobody ever try to whoop one of her grandkids in front of her. She wouldn't have it. Now, she knowed she couldn't control us kids all day long, keep us satisfied. So when we'd help her out best we could, she'd use that subtle approach. She'd start laying little hints down early about, down at the store I heard some little boy went missing. Somebody seen a monster down here back of the woods here a few days ago. What's going on? And that'd kind of get her attention. So we'd help her all we could. She'd tell these little stories. And when it got just before dark, them lightning bugs really come out back in them days. Seemed like they was 10 times what they are now. And we'd have fun catching them up. She'd give us some ball jars, and we'd love to catch them up and have a little contest who could catch the most out of all of us. And we'd catch these things up and we'd try to count them. There'd be so many you just couldn't count them moving around in them jars. And we loved doing that. Well, after we got tired of it, about dark, we'd let them all go. And it'd get so dark you just barely could see out. And Mammy would round us all up in the house, make sure we had her something to eat. But we started running around, hollering, screaming, knocking things over. Well, she wasn't going to have that. So she'd pull us all up, start asking questions, what's going on at school, what you been doing. And we'd talk a little bit, and we'd still be screaming and hollering. And she's going to pull out her stories. We knowed it was coming. She pulled out about the old witch that lived down the holler that liked to grab kids and eat them. They don't know what happened to them. Well, we'd listen to that, but she'd pull out the greatest one of all, Rawhead and Bloody Bones. She loved that story. She knowed that was the one that get our attentions and keep us listening. And we'd ask her stuff like, well, where does old Rawhead live at? Where does he stay? Well, she'd tell us that he lives in the ground under these old hollow trees during the day. He stays up in under the trees in the ground, and he only pops out when he hears kids sassing their parents or not minding or misbehaving. He'd pop that head up waiting to come and get them. He'd stay around all day there waiting for it to get dark, but he'd be listening for them kids that's misbehaving, not minding, sassing their parents. He'd lay there all day long just taking names. And after it got plumb dark, sun gone down, he'd come out of that old hole under them old hollow trees, out of the ground, and he'd start going looking for these kids that's misbehaving. And when he hit the moonlight, he looked stuff like this. An old Rawhead, bloody looking, all over. Had big old teeth too, and he was hungry. And she'd keep on telling about this story. She knowed it was getting her attention. She'd say how he'd sneak up to the house around these places where these kids is not behaving. He'd get up behind the smokehouse or in the barn, waiting for us to catch us at a bad time or when we go to sleep. He'd sit there all evening there. And every once in a while, you'd hear the dog barking at the same time, and that'd really get your attention, scare you to death. She'd say, listen, there's old Rawhead. He's around. He's looking for them kids that's misbehaving. Well, that'd get our attention. And she'd keep on and on, just talking about what he done and what he looked like, and have us all scared to death. It was so quiet you could hear the crickets outside through the walls. And I can imagine stuff like this. Oh man, we huddled up together so close because we knowed that he was just out there somewhere. And I'd been mean all day long. And when we'd get ready to go to bed, we'd make her go in there in the bedroom and look under the beds, make sure he wasn't in there waiting on us. We really made that. And we'd all gather up in this bed, and we'd all sleep scared to death. But no, I'd lay there. Where's he at? I know I broke a whatnot today, and there was an old window there that had no curtains on it, and he'd be jet black looking through it, and I couldn't help but look at him. I just knowed old Bloody Bones is out there. He's looking for me. And I'd look over there and imagine I'd see this and just about scare me to death. But if I actually seen it, I'd probably passed out screaming. And we lay there in that bed, I'd finally just sheer exhaustion fall asleep and hoping one of my cousins or siblings didn't wet the bed. Well, the next morning, I did survive the night. Mama was up making us some breakfast. Things was normal again. And the sun come on out, and we was outside hitting the yard again. So she knowed just how to take control of us kids. She always did. And she didn't need no switch either. So that's my grandmother's version of Rawhead and Bloody Bones. Now everybody has their own version. Everybody's heard different stories. But this is my version of Rawhead and Bloody Bones. So I want to thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.